Hey, all of us were incredibly devastated by the news over the Thanksgiving holiday of a couple of our National Guardsmen who were just assaulted, attacked, one murdered in cold blood. And then to see the response, like if anything should pull us together, it should be our united response that is evil. And yet what we saw on the other side was just the opposite, blaming Trump for creating the environment, blaming our military troops for following orders, comparing our military troops to those at the Nuremberg trials who were on trial for the heinous crimes committed during the Nazi Holocaust. I mean, this is sick, disgusting behavior from the left. This is what we've grown used to, I guess. So we're talking about accountability today. Our courts are out of control. Our courts have become politicized. And really the question is, who's holding these people responsible, not only for the reckless rhetoric, but for the judicial activism? What did our founding fathers think about this? And then to bring it closer to home, Indiana is pulling together the legislature to deal with the whole issue of redistricting. Why is this important? We're going to talk about all of these issues in our podcast today. You won't want to miss it.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
My co-host caught me with a mouthful of peanuts and M&M's.
Christmas cheers.
For breakfast. I'm just enjoying the holiday spirit. You're just going with the podcast, huh? This is really some good stuff here. I did go in and steal this. As you know, podcast is being recorded on Monday, and then it airs on Thursday. So by Thursday, this place will be converted into a winter wonderland of holy holiday Christmas celebration. So I did manage to sneak this out of the storage room. I told him I'd bring it back. So
What?
Make sure you hold me accountable.
Staying here for the rest of December. We take tradition seriously at Living Stones. So
we do. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that we've got that nice big open foyer with all the glass. It's just so inviting when you drive by the church and you look in and you see the, I don't know, how many Christmas trees are we up to now?
We got a lot. 50.
We don't worship
100.
Christmas trees, though, just to be clear. We worship Jesus, but the Christmas trees certainly set the mood for this amazing time of year. And I just want to thank everybody. The building is just a beehive of activity today. So many people came out to help assemble trees. And, I talked to one of our dear sisters who was, her job was to take all of the beautiful red bows that have been packed in a box all year long. And they are like flat as pancakes. So she's trying to fluff up all the red bows and making everything look beautiful. I mean, you forget how much work goes in. Well, I guess you don't forget because you do it on a small scale at your house, right?
Yeah.
But how much work really goes into making the holiday so beautiful and celebrating Christ and his birth. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the Christmas Eve, actually it's a pre-Christmas Eve candlelight service that we've got coming up for the holidays here, 2 different times. I believe it's 5 and 7. And we want to encourage everybody, invite your friends and neighbors out. Also, we just started a new series called Christ is All That Matters, working our way through Colossians. And I thought, again, Sunday was obviously we probably had half of our folks out but due to the storm that hit. But even having half of our people out was amazing, given the inclement weather that we had.
I feel like it was a powerful Sunday. You delivered a powerful message. Worship was powerful. There's something about that, 8:30 in the morning when there's a storm out that we gather and talk about the supremacy of Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. Christ is all that matters. And as you said, the supremacy of Christ in all things. Just great truths to remind ourselves of. And I can't think of a more fitting passage of Scripture to dive into leading up to the birth of Christ than where we're at. It's such a rich, rich book. As we work our way through, we'll get into the practical aspects of what it means that Christ is supreme. Like, what does that mean in the workplace? What does that mean in your marriage? What does that mean with your family and kids? There's a lot of practical applications of that. So really encourage you to come out. And I know a lot of you weren't able to be there, so get online, check it out. Check out the online broadcast of the. What am I trying to say, Matthew? It's
online. It's posted.
YouTube.
Yes.
YouTube.
It's up there. You can watch. You can watch the whole thing. I need to eat some more M&Ms so I got energy going to my brain. right, go ahead. Talk about whatever you want, Andrew.
Well, I think we have to mention the Bears and the Eagles.
Oh, thank you.
And I totally forgot about
Are you
it.
blessed that he brought that
I
up?
totally forgot about the game.
Woo!
And I thought of you guys like 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I was like, wait a second, I feel like there's something going
4
on.
o'clock? You should have come over and watched it with me.
I tuned in at the last like 3-4 minutes of the game because I totally forgot about it. Okay, until I thought about you guys, and I was like, I just need to tune in and see how much the Eagles are killing the Bears. And I tuned in, and I couldn't believe the Bears were winning. And they were like, they had the ball, and they were up by like 8 points or something like that or 9 points or something.
A signature victory. I mean, Matthew and I were talking about this. If we were shaky about anything, it would have been the Eagles because I mean, we're talking about Super Bowl champions.
No, they're good. Eagles are good. That was a legit win.
How about a spiritual application of this? We're watching the Eagles. They've been to the Super Bowl twice in the last 4 years. Of course, they won the Super Bowl last year. They struggled last week. They were up 21-0, and the Cowboys, I think, came from behind and beat
that was
them.
a great game.
And so they blew a 21-point lead. I get it. Their fans are a little frustrated. But the first series, they don't move the ball. They punt the ball. And the fans are booing them out of the stadium.
For real.
And I kept thinking, here we are, like the Bears fans, just toss us a crumb. I mean, we got a first down. Woo! we ran a successful offensive play. Yay! Anyway, I mean, it's amazing to me how unthankful we can get when we're spoiled, and I would say Eagles fans have been spoiled with the team and the talent that they've had. And I was just listening to these boo birds thinking, I hope I never get that way. The encouragement goes a whole lot farther. Don't you wish everybody could be yelling out, hey, we love you guys. We believe in you. Keep it up. That's not what happens, though, when people drink too many beers and are spoiled with their past success. They start yelling horrible things.
It's a tough city.
It is.
They're tough in the sports.
It is. Now they're talking about, firing their coach and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you people are nuts. But anyway, on to brighter things. Yeah. But hey, that was a bright thing. And now we have to beat the hated green bean pickers from the north. That's what I call them, the green bean pickers.
Who had a great game themselves for a win. I saw that.
Yeah, they did. So it's going to be an epic battle. In fact, it could be that the two best teams in the NFC are from the same division at the end of the day. We'll see. We'll see. We still got a lot of football to play. But anyway, let's talk about something that really ticked me off. And I mean
switching
this,
tone here.
I mean this in the fullest sense of the word. When we were greeted with the news of the ambush shooting of the National Guard members near the White House, where 2 of the Guard members were shot, and one, of course, succumbed to the injuries, a 20-year-old young lady. And you hear again, it's the same story. It just keeps revisiting the horrifically failed policies of the Biden administration, just swinging open our borders, letting anybody come in, not vetting people properly. And so now you have this guy who traveled all the way by car from the Washington State across the United States to commit this murder and yelling Allahu Akbar. Again, I mean, it's clearly it is a Islamic fundamentalist terrorist doing what they do and what they've been doing and what they have been perpetrating across America in terms of our citizens. And I think people are just sick of it. This is an example of failed government at its finest. This person came over from the failed Biden administration, departure from Afghanistan, where we left all kinds of, billions of dollars of weapons. They hailed it as a great success. It was an absolute joke, failure, epic military failure. And now we're still paying the price for this because we've got a whole bunch of these folks that came over under those auspices who again, they hate America. This is their mode of operation, and it's just it breaks my heart to think that there was Thanksgiving and a table set, and this young lady was not going to be there and will never be there because of failed government philosophies and practices. And again, we're still trying to recover from 4 years of the Biden administration doing this, and the millions and millions of people we have in our country right now who we have absolutely no idea who they are, what they stand for, what their histories are, what their past records are, if they have criminal offenses. I mean, it's created such a gargantuan task for the Trump administration to once again clean up the mess that was left behind, and this happens over and over and over again. And I'm just sick of it. I'm sick to my stomach about it. I'm sick about trying to compare this person to one of my own children, one of my own daughters. It's needless, and it takes us back, in my opinion, to where we were at the end of the last podcast. We had 6 congressional leaders that were basically encouraging lawlessness among our troops and basically indicting this administration for being a lawless, immoral administration. So once again, the rhetoric from the left, negative, vitriolic, stirring the pot, calling names, accusing, making horrible accusations of things that they have not one scintilla of proof for. And it creates this atmosphere where people like this who shouldn't be in our country are able to perpetrate, those types of heinous crimes. And I think the average American, in fact, I think I saw the data on this. It was like something like 72% of evangelicals, 72%, according to polls, said evangelicals were outraged. So, again, I hear all this talk, Trump's losing his base, blah, blah, blah. I think it's a bunch of baloney. I think the people that voted him overwhelmingly into office are sick of this garbage. And they're glad that we're finally doing whatever it takes. It's messy work. It's unpleasant work. It doesn't give you the warm, fuzzy vibes. But removing people, sometimes forcefully, from our country who shouldn't be here in the first place because of failed government, is messy. But I'll tell you this, I think the vast majority of people who believed in the Trump agenda are still enthusiastically behind what's taking place, and I'm one of them. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I mean, that to me put a massive damper on the whole Thanksgiving celebration.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major issue. I guess my thoughts, if we can't unite around something like this, I'm talking about left and the right, cannot unite around a tragedy, a horrific crime, terrorism, what do you want to call it, then do we even have a country?
I mean, just to your point, when 2 National Guardsmen are murdered in cold blood
in D.C.,
in our nation's capital, to add insult to injury around the holidays when we're all trying to celebrate and give thanks and come together and be with family and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't hear one media outlet condemn what took place. They all tried to spin it. They all tried to blame Trump for creating the atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. If you cannot rally around the fact that it is wrong, it is morally wrong to murder another person, no excuses. You murdered another person, cold-blooded murder. This is wrong. I mean, I think we've absolutely lost our moral compass in this country, and it's scary, like to your point. This should not be something that separates Democrats and Republicans. This should be something that everyone can stand, so to speak, figuratively on the steps of the Capitol and overtly condemn this kind of behavior. But we're not seeing it, and that to me is I say scary in the right way. It's scary in that we're so morally blind.
Now, I heard a couple commentary, Victor Davis Hanson, a couple others on this. They call this a seditious 6 in their exhortation of the military to disobey illegal orders. And he was using words like civil war out there. He was using that type of language because of the level of divisiveness in our nation, our country. And it's interesting because I look at like Western traditional first world nations, and they're pretty much all very, very divided with this push towards nationalism and populism versus like this globalistic, like we should have no boundary, no borders. We should have like unfettered immigration and whatnot. It's like the West is being consumed by that, whereas like the East has no problem or have very little problem defending their national identity. And just looking at that, I'm like, man, I mean, there are some nations in the West, like Italy and some South American nations, which I don't know, consider the West, but that's like, hey, you know what? We're going to secure our border, Poland. But man, the West, like, it's become this really interesting division between globalism and nationalism. And some of the traditionally more third world nations, I wouldn't call China a third world nation at this point, but some of those Eastern nations, like, they have no problem kicking people out of their nation. They have no problem defending their...
I just saw where the Japanese, they have a very clear immigration policy, and somebody was bringing up the practice of cremation, which is a Japanese practice. That's what they do. And they were condemning that or requiring some other form of burial. And the Japanese officials just basically said, hey, this is the way we do it in Japan. If you don't like it, go somewhere else, In other words, they have a clear Japanese way of doing things, a Japanese identity, a Japanese border, a Japanese nationality. And as we saw and talked about in an earlier podcast, nationalism or boundaries or borders or nations is clearly supported in Scripture. Having a national identity, like we're Germans, we're Poles, we're Czechs, whatever it is, that's not a bad thing. It gives you a common sense of purpose, and it brings you together as a nation around a common set of core values and principles and things that matter to you. And you cannot have a nation apart from that. And that's why we're seeing, when you allow millions of unvetted people from nations that do not share the values of America, you're not building strength through diversity. You're actually destroying the country. There's nothing that causes the people or the nation to cohere. And then when you have these globalists who have infiltrated higher education and the media, and they condemn folks like you or me for saying, hey, I'm proud to be an American, or the word patriot is now viewed as a Christian nationalist term, or even this ridiculous term Christian nationalist, as if it's wrong to be a Christian and it's wrong to love your nation. All of these words are used as slurs to attach some type of demeaning, cultural value that somehow if you hold these views, you're now the enemy, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're whatever. But we're seeing this worked out, as you pointed out, especially in Europe, Western Europe, and you can see the handwriting on the wall. So when a congressional leader uses the word civil war, which I think is a terrible use of language, I would rather talk about cultural war or ideological war. We certainly don't want it to, digress into physical engagement and bloodshed and people picking up arms and warring against each other. That to me is even also just irresponsible rhetoric to even talk that way when we should be trying to build common ground and pull people together around who we are as a nation. But maybe we're beyond that.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's any common ground. The way that this is trending, as Christians, you want to bring peace, you want to bring that common ground, but at least the leaders or the heads, I feel like the normal people who are Democrats, Republicans have a lot of common ground, but I feel like the leaders of these organizations, man, they're looking for power, they're looking to win at all costs, and you're escalating one another. So, well,
we still haven't heard, again, what these illegal commands are. I heard brought up, that it's illegal for how our military is eliminating narco-terrorists who, somebody made the comment, I thought this was so ridiculous. Like, how do we know that they're racing across the ocean in the dark of the night, bringing cocaine or fentanyl into our country? I mean, it could be Barbie dolls for, poor people or something like that. I mean, as if our government does not know exactly what's happening and what's in those containers and where they're coming from and who's shipping it there. And, it's just stupidity. Like, why don't you stay in your lane? Obviously, you know nothing about national defense. And obviously, you know nothing about what's going on with this drug cartel and where all these shipments are coming and how many lives are being destroyed because of it. And Trump, I think, rightly calls this an attack, upon our nation in terms of warfare, trying to import all of these illegal drugs that literally destroy our population. So the fact that you send a message and you eliminate the boat, the drugs, and everybody in the boat, to me says to the guy on the other end, you probably want to think twice before you're going to brazenly cross into our nation and deliver what you're about to deliver, which you know is illegal and harmful. You're going to think twice about it, or else you're going to end up the way the other boat ended up. That, to me, is just strength through national defense. It is a powerful deterrence. A drug dealer coming from another nation illegally into our nation does not get due process of the law. We're not going to come out and ask you to pull your boat over and take a stroll with us to the courthouse. That's an act of war on your part and what you're doing to our nation. So in my mind, I fully support what's going on. I think if you care about our kids, our young people, you care about drugs, you care about the ravaging toll of drugs in our nation, then you're, again, applauding that somebody's finally doing something about this. We have a drug problem because our politicians don't care to stop it. Because we certainly have the technology, we certainly have the military power to stop the inflow of drugs into our nation if we wanted to. And I think the issue is that we have not had the political willpower to do so. And that's why I'm grateful Donald Trump. You'll never say anything about Donald Trump regarding his lack of will to lead. He is a leader, and he's going to lead. And sometimes people don't like his style. But he's strange to politicians who are good at making speeches and doing absolutely nothing. And so I appreciate what he's doing, and I find it appalling, to bring up another point, that the genius Joy Behar, I don't know if I messed up her name, her sick comments on their program that nobody should watch. I thank God. I just want to say this. I thank God publicly that I've never sacrificed any brain cells on the altar of watching The View. Is that what it's called? No.
Yes, that's called The View.
The View?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have never wasted 1 second of my time, but I do get to read, in hindsight, some of the ridiculous views of these people. But she had the audacity to compare our current military men and women to the Nuremberg trials, where Hitler's henchmen were put on trial for all the atrocities they committed during the Nazi Holocaust. And to suggest that this is even in any way, shape, or form morally equivalent to that shows, again, just such a ridiculous understanding of history. And it's actually so insulting that she would suggest that the day is coming when Trump's out of office and all of our fine military personnel who are simply doing their jobs are going to be somehow carted before Congress like the Nuremberg trials and found guilty of basically what she was saying, war crimes. And again, sometimes, if it wasn't for the Holy Ghost, you just like to slap somebody silly. And that's what I'd like to do with Joy Behar. That type of moronic talk, It is an insult to our military, and it simply throws gasoline on the fires of irresponsible rhetoric that are already ablaze and that are largely responsible for the death of so many already in our country.
Well, the problem is there's no consequences for that type of speech, right? And there's plenty of reward, because we're talking about today. When you make a statement like that,
are you telling me I'm helping Joy's cause? I think you just pointed it out. She got me.
That's what they do. They make these super inflammatory comments, and then they get people talking about it. And it's like, was it all news is good news, or bad news is good, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's no consequences to these things unless they're sued, and every once in a while they do get sued.
Yeah.
But in general, you make these comments, and you're just like, you put it out there. And you justify whatever case you want, whatever facts you want to have, and you cause a stir, and you have the news cycle, and then you got the next news cycle. So
no, and you bring out a good point. I think that's the tragedy of the way the whole system is monetized, right?
Yeah.
Those voices that are most out there, most radical, most conspiratorial, are the ones who get the most clicks. And the ones who get the most clicks, get the most jackpot. Yeah, and it's unfortunate.
You have a balanced, precise, very well thought out perspective. No one cares. you throw something else, you throw the Nuremberg word out there, all of a sudden people pay attention.
Yeah.
Right? That's their job. That's their.
You brought up a good point. Accountability. Where's accountability? I was glad to see that the Defense Department is going to be exploring some of these comments and calling some of these people at least to task. I saw where the one gentleman,
Mark
Kelly was just as brazen as ever, on some liberal talk show. I'm not going to back down. If they think I'm going to back down, all this bravado and all the, airheads are clapping their hands as if this is something brave and courageous. I also saw a picture that just recently surfaced with him and George Soros' son, which suggests that he's been compromised or radicalized in terms of his views. Anybody that would be in a picture with any member of the Soros family, you have to question what's going on there. But I thought this was a step in the right direction. This was legislation that was introduced by Representative Randy Fine, a Republican from Florida. He introduced legislation early September 2025 aimed at holding judges accountable for releasing violent repeat offenders who go on to commit further crimes. This, I think, is a step in the right direction. He lists all of the innocent folks that have been in the news lately who have been murdered in cold blood from somebody who has a rap sheet a mile long and has no business being on the streets. And so when you go back and you go, how does this person who has 25 previous convictions, 70-some convictions, how are they out on the street perpetrating another crime on an innocent person? And some of these, again, aren't just, theft or whatever. I mean, we're talking about murdering people, and I could list all the names. They've been on the news. I won't do that. But this legislation is part of an ongoing effort to ensure greater accountability in the justice system. So to your point earlier about accountability, what do you think about that? Should we be able to go back and basically, if a judge has let somebody back out when they should be behind bars, should we be able to remove that person from their seat?
I think absolutely. I think there should be more accountability for judicial branch. But the problem is that law is probably not going to pass because, we don't control the Senate. We don't have 60 seats in the Senate. So it's just gesturing at some point. So that's why, that's why these judges make these decisions, because they have zero accountability. And I don't know if the Supreme Court has some kind of jurisdiction over some of these judges so that they have some kind of direct accountability. Like if you make a really bad decision, you get overridden by the Supreme Court eventually. And I guess there's some type of shame, some type of, whatever associated with it. But man, it's a complicated, you stall the process major. That you can, even the redistricting issue in Texas, that those judges, again, what accountability they have? It was immediately stalled or stilled by Alito, but what consequences do they face?
No, I get it completely. And that brings up another point here. I was doing a little research on nationwide injunctions, and when you look at what has happened, for instance, in the previous Biden administration, the Obama administration, even the Bushes, to go all the way back, the number of federal injunctions that have been basically where a judge unilaterally puts the brakes, throws the monkey wrench on the administration's, plan. Again, what does Congress makes the laws? The executive branch implements the laws, and the Supreme Court or the courts are supposed to interpret the law, not make the law. Unfortunately, what we're seeing more and more is that the courts have become politicized, and we have courts that are telling the president what he can and cannot do. And we're not talking about the Supreme Court; we're talking about lower federal courts, district courts, and then everything gets put on hold, as you pointed out. So the whole it's a tactic. The whole agenda gets put into reverse, or the parking brake gets yanked up, and then everything comes to a screeching halt until a judge or we appeal and go up to a higher court. But the whole process is delay, and it's intentional. And I think, again, it's not our courts are broken right now. This is not the way it's supposed to be operating. But this is probably the only effective strategy the Democrats have been able to muster is judicial activism, just putting cronies in judicial seats who actually share their political views and who are willing to use the courts to stop at whatever measure they have to take to stop the agenda of the opposing administration. And, it's not the way it's supposed to work. But the numbers are crazy when you look at the data, and I won't go into all the numbers. But basically, Trump's agenda has faced unprecedented judicial resistance, especially through nationwide injunctions and the sheer volume of lawsuits. Obama and Bush saw far fewer injunctions, though Obama had a record number of unanimous Supreme Court defeats, which means he was especially reckless and lawless when the Supreme Court unanimously slaps you down. That's different than what we're seeing with Trump, because Trump's getting nearly everything, and anything he tries to do gets slapped by some court somewhere. So anyway, our judges and our judiciary needs a lot of help. I want to get to the second thing over here. Our founders. What did our founders have to say against judicial supremacy? This was Thomas Jefferson in 1820. He said, "You seem to consider the judge as the ultimate arbiter of all constitutional questions." He said, "A very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under a despotism of an oligarchy." He was pointing out that unchecked judicial power creates an unelected ruling class. And think about it, they're appointed for life. If they get to make up the laws or slap down everything they disagree with, then basically you have an oligarchy, unelected oligarchy, an elite ruling class that pretty much runs the country. And that's kind of where we're at now. It doesn't matter that there was a super majority of people who voted for President Trump and for his agenda. When one court justice somewhere in America doesn't like it, and they can say, well, that's illegal or that's unconstitutional. When again, our Congress is supposed to be the ones that are determining whether or not a law is legit or not. Most of them are lawyers anyway. They're the ones that pass the laws. They go through the process of grinding out the ins and outs of what that law says. They do judicial reviews and law reviews over that before it gets to the final rubber stamping phase anyway. So that's where the safety lies, is in numbers, not in, again, this oligarchy of despotism that happens when there's no constitutional accountability or judicial accountability. Here's another quote from Jefferson: "Our judges are as honest as other men, and not more so. And their power is the more dangerous as they are in office for life and not responsible, as the other functionaries are to the elective control." In other words, they can't be voted out of office. If we get ticked off at a representative, we can vote him or her out of office. We don't get to have that opportunity with our judges. "The Constitution," he goes on to say, "has erected no such single tribunal, knowing that whatever hands confided with corruptions of time and party, its members would become despots." So once again, these guys were very, very bright. They saw the power of not reining in the courts, and they saw the potential that could happen if our justices just basically decided they were going to use their position to make the laws instead of simply interpreting law, that they should have a minor role, not a major role. But at this point in our nation, they have a huge major role, because if you say to, if you're the judge who, shoots down whatever it is the president's doing, and I represent the president, and I say, what you're doing is illegal and we're not going to abide by your ruling, then we're the ones that are accused of being lawless and we're threats to democracy and on and on and on, when in actuality, that justice is a threat to democracy, because they're abusing their position and they're not understanding the limitations of their power.
Yeah, that's one of probably the limitations of our Constitution, is basically you're giving the greatest authority to the umpires or to the referees in the game, except that they have no accountability. Can you imagine in Super Bowl?
Oh, yeah.
The ref is calling left and right, and they don't get fired, they don't get reviewed, there's no instant replay, and they just do whatever they want. And guess what? The Super Bowl's ruined.
That's right. That's right. Nobody wants to watch the game because one single official can completely skew the results. Yeah. That would not be any fun to participate in. And that's what happens when you have crooked judges. Everybody gets very cynical about the whole system.
Yeah,
and then people just don't participate.
Exactly. Why even vote? What does it matter anyways?
Yeah, so this is huge. Which brings me up to another point. I don't know if you saw, we were talking a little bit about it, but it looks like our Indiana State legislature is reconvening, and they are going to take up the whole issue of redistricting. Now, I am a proponent of looking at the big picture and being a team player. So when our president is concerned that the Democrats in states like, liberal states like Illinois, California, et cetera, are gerrymandering the districts, and there is a difference between redistricting and gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is what the congressional map of Illinois looks like. It's when you start off drawing the map in the far southwest part of the state, and it goes up like a salamander-type creature through the middle of the state and works its way back down, and you wonder who drew those lines and why were they drawn that way? It makes no sense. Well, it makes complete sense when you're trying to squeeze out as many votes as you possibly can and draw as many districts in your favor as you possibly can. The problem is those districts do not represent the people of the state. In other words, one party is severely underrepresented in that type of a thing. What President Trump wants to do is say, look, we need to go back, those of you that are in Republican states, and look at the states, look at your districts, and see if we can draw favorable lines. Now, favorable lines that's part of the privilege of being the majority in your state. I didn't say illegal lines. I didn't say gerrymandered lines. There's lots of ways to draw lines. They should look like districts, and they should be located in your part of the state. They shouldn't go all the way down to the middle or all the way up to the far corner. There should be some, order to how those lines are drawn. Anyway, my point is this. Indiana's going to go back and look at that, which I say great. President Trump is concerned that the same thing's going to happen to his second term as it happened before, and that he's going to lose the majority that we have or continue to operate under a very thin majority. And then what that means for those of us who voted for him is that the agenda gets sidetracked. And my take is this: we're not. This is not a game we're playing here. There's lives at stake. There's policy decisions at stake. There's budget decisions at stake. And one example that I was pointing out as an example of this is the State Department is going to classify gender transitions for children and abortion as human rights abuses. Now, again, you might not like Trump's style, but if you're a Christian and you care about stopping gender mutilations that are taking place under the whole LGBTQ transgender movement, which, by the way, has come to a screeching halt in many, many ways, that impacts how many lives? You look at, of course, abortion policy and all of that. Those are just two areas. But my point is this. As believers, we should be doing everything possible within the legal limits. We're not doing anything illegal, but to make sure that we are preserving the majority that we have to push forward the agenda, again, that the American people voted for. And that it's not being taken away from us through drawing lines and, whether it's through the illegal allowance of illegals to come into our country and giving them the privileges of voting, which the Democrats are experts at. All the different congressional districts that should not be because they are populated with illegal folks. There's so much abuse on the other side because all they care about, we've talked about this, all they care about is power. They'll do whatever they can to retain the power. And the immigration crisis is a direct result of that. We need to start playing hardball on the other side of the aisle. Again, not illegally. We're not stooping. Some of the people have brought up, well, we need to be principled, not like the Democrats. Yeah, we need to be principled. The principle is let's do things the right way so that we win and that we can continue to implement a vision that leads to life. And let's not be the wimpy Republicans who just sit on the sideline and never do anything other than make sure that we have enough votes to get reelected. You and I talked about this. I'm going to shut up here and let you jump in because we're going to run out of time. But when somebody says, well, I talked to some people in my district and they don't like Trump. Okay, so what? Do you like Trump? You're the one that got elected. You're not a chameleon. I get so tired when politicians are going to run around and say, well, how do you feel about it? Well, how do you feel about it? No, you tell us how you feel about it, and then that determines whether or not I'm going to vote for you. That's how people get elected. And especially Christian politicians, because they act like when they get elected, their job is to represent every single person in their district. And you cannot do that because every single person in your district does not share your same value system. But you're the one in power, so lead. And I'm hoping we see some strong leadership, especially from even people right here in our own backyard, because otherwise I think there's going to be some primary activity going on, and there should be. It's like if you're in charge, support the agenda. Get behind your president. Get behind this administration. Let's move the ball forward. And I guess the proof is in the pudding. We're going to see over the next few weeks what happens.
Yeah, my take is simple. Republicans without Trump are dying. Republicans without Trump are not getting the low propensity voters out to win elections. We saw that in the midterms. We saw that in the election this past November. Why? And why are the Democrats? They don't need a Trump. People are coming out for Democrats. Now, my idea is because the Democrats are uniting their purpose and they are they're shooting to kill. They are looking to win, and Republicans don't know what the heck they're doing. And I guess what I want from my representatives is: are you going to win, or are you going to just do a bunch of activities to say I've done some activities, but the results, well, that's really out of my control. Whereas the Democrats aren't that. The Democrats are saying the results is what we care about. I don't care about what activities you do. If we don't get the results, then we lose. There is a winner's mentality to the Democrat. Whether I disagree with them or not, there is a killer instinct to the Democrats. And the Republicans are just like, not all of them, but a lot of them are just.
Yeah. I get very, very frustrated with the person who, like I said, who's a chameleon. Stop taking a public opinion poll to determine what your position is. Why don't you have a reasoned, well thought out, principled conviction that doesn't really matter what your neighbor thinks about your conviction? Your neighbor might not vote for you, but obviously enough people, after they heard what you stood for, enough people voted for you that you're now in office. So will you lead? Will you have a spine? Will you have a backbone? Will you take a stand on important issues? Or are you just going to put your finger up in the wind and say, well, there's some moms out there that think Trump's over the top? Well, great. Bless their hearts. But why don't we act like big people and look at the bigger picture and realize what is at stake if we do not retain a majority in the House and in the Senate, or gain the House, I guess, but the slim majority in the Senate.
Yep.
And if we allow Democrats to gerrymander as they have proven to, again, my point, my point here is all I got to do is pull up the map of Illinois, and you can see what gerrymandering looks like. They're not looking to change their evil ways, so we should be smart in the way we draw our lines. Not, again, gerrymandering, but drawing lines that are favorable so that the people of Indiana are represented and that the administration and their agenda that we voted for overwhelmingly gets moved forward. And that innocent people, like some of these National Guardsmen, are not murdered in cold blood, only, a matter of feet away from the nation's capital. This is unacceptable. This is where we're at. Trump's doing something about it. The Democrats will only pour gasoline on the fire. So that to me is the biggest argument behind redistricting is what future do you want? Let's do everything we can as Hoosiers to secure a future that leads to life and blessing and prosperity, not the agenda we saw for the last 4 years. So anyway, it'd be interesting to see. Encourage everybody, at least in Indiana, that listens to us. Call your senator, call your representative. Obviously, be kind and polite, but make sure that you communicate your heart on these important issues. And you might disagree, with me or with Andrew or whatever. You're free to have your own position, but let your voice be heard. I feel like we've made our voices heard today. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.